Well, hello there. I'm Matt Vanacoro with Waves Factory, checking out Samba drums. This is an amazing instrument, a real collection of some unique and great sounding percussion sounds, all with a really cool flair recorded with close mics, far mics, and in a solo and ensemble setting. All right, so you'll see these green keys here. The green keys are the different individual access to the instruments that you have. And you'll notice that with each of these regions, I've got two different strikes, and I've got the ability to use the white notes or the black notes to get solo and ensemble articulations. So if I'm using F and G here, and I'm accessing that cool Latin snare, if I go to F sharp and G sharp, I get a solo version of the same snare. Versus, you can hear a little bit of a difference when the ensemble plays as opposed to the soloist. Now, if you want to configure any of these drums, you have complete control over them individually. If you open the mixer, you'll notice I've got a close and a far mic setup. That enables me to adjust and sort of tailor the sound of it. Now, if you listen, you can really hear a difference. For example, if I play a sequence that uses all of the drums, and then I listen to just the close mics playing that, as you can hear, you've got a lot of area that you can sculpt your sound with, and you can adjust the width and stereo pan of any of the mics as well. So when we're adjusting the width, you'll notice I start and I go down to 0, and once I'm at 0, if I keep going past 0 into negative values, you're swapping the stereo channels. So if you don't like where one of the drums is panned, you can go ahead and change the width all the way around and flop the stereo around if you want. So let's go back out to the drums. Now, I did say you had individual control in addition to the mix control, and you do. So if I start playing a drum, all right, let's take a look at that snare there. We'll use the solo articulation. I click on it, and up come my options. On the left side, I've got adjustments I can make to the solo notes, and on the right side, the ensemble notes. And they're independent adjustments. So if I raise the pitch of the solo, it stays normal for the ensemble. Another way to squeak out a couple of notes of a different sounding drum if you want. You can adjust the volume and pan. So if you think that one drum is sticking out when you're using it in a sequence, you've got individual control over all of them, which is great. You can change the instrument you're working on by clicking there, or you can just click it on the screen in front of you. And as you'll see, you have access to all of them. Click it again to make that menu go away. I've got access to a robust effects system. I can put effects on the close mic, the far mics, and on the master as well. So if you want to adjust just the close mics, you decide, hey, I've got to compress just those close mics. It's getting a little out of control dynamically. I like the sound, but it's just too loud. You can go ahead and compress it, but not compress the far mics, or vice versa. And of course, you can put a little ambience on the master if you want. So if you play it back and you're like, that's a little dry, go ahead and put some reverb on it. Nice and subtle, and you don't have to worry about diving into Contact's programming interface or something like that. You don't have to open up the settings of the instrument. So you've heard a couple of times a sequencer, and maybe you thought, hey, are you using a digital audio workstation to trigger that? No, I've got access to a sequencer right here in the instrument collection. So these blue keys down at the bottom are triggering the different presets of the sequencer. And you see I've got individual control over all the instruments. I can decide whether I want to use the single articulation or the ensemble articulation. I can disable globally a bunch of the instruments if I want to, which is also really cool if you want to work on it. You can go ahead and turn them on or off on your own, so you can completely tweak these presets. Also, by clicking multiple times in the cell, you can cycle through the various velocity ranges of that instrument. So you've got access to different velocities simply by clicking inside the sequencer. There's a couple of quickies too. If I hit Shift on any of these, you'll notice it can delete the entire line. So if I want to just wipe all of them clean, it's really easy to do quite quickly. If I did set a couple of velocities to different levels, I can quickly turn them on and off by using the command button. So command clicking we'll go ahead and turn them on and off at that full velocity. Now you noticed I deleted the sequence quickly by hitting Shift and going to each individual layer, but you can actually delete the whole sequence as well. So if I go ahead to one of these, all I have to do is Shift and click on the presets knob. Bam. Brand new sequence, ready for me to start from scratch. And of course, if you're scared, you messed up, you had a good one, you want it back, just Option click the preset knob, and back it comes. You can decide how many steps you're working with, the tempo, and even the intensity, which is great, because if I hold that down, you might hear, wow, that's a little loud. And I can pull back the intensity, which is great because these percussion samples have different layers. It's not just lowering the master volume, it's making those players play the lower velocity samples, which is different from just lowering the master volume. All right, let's take a look at the settings page. So if I open up the settings page, you'll notice I've got access to a round robin, which is really important for realism. So if I play the same velocity level and I have the round robin set to 1 repetition, you hear that sample over and over and over again. If I set it to 6 repetitions, you've got different attacks on the drum. You know, when a human being plays a note, even if they play the same note twice in a row, it's going to sound a little different. All the physics of being a human and playing an instrument come into play. So for realism's sake, you'll want to keep that round robin up high, unless of course you're trying to conserve processing resources or you need the precision of a single sample. Now, the velocity curve will allow you to restrict or expand on the velocity of the samples. So when I hit the snare, if I decide I don't ever want to get to those maximum velocity samples, I can restrict it so that even if I hit the notes really hard, I'm getting the softer velocity samples. And vice versa. You can make sure that even if you tap softly, you get a bit louder. Now the curve adjustment will allow you to alter the curve to better suit your MIDI controller. So if your MIDI controller is not getting you to the higher samples unless you really tromp on it and hit it hard, you can actually adjust the curve to favor the higher velocity samples. And vice versa. If you find you're getting to the higher ones a little too fast, you can go ahead and pull the curve back. Now, the dynamic range will allow you to adjust how much range is happening when you play. So if I want, for example, if I'm worried that some of my notes are getting lost as I play them, and the little quieter notes are not sitting out in my loud mix, I can lower the dynamic range so that even if I play softly, it's hitting those higher dynamic range samples, the higher velocity samples. Now, finally, I've got access to an envelope. And with the envelope, I can adjust the articulation for all the drums at once or just one at a time. So if I'm playing the snare, I don't want to adjust the articulation of all the rest. I just go ahead and adjust snare. Now I have the option to pull back the attack. So I can get that skin, or I can sort of take the skin out of it and have a lot more snare than snare skin. And of course, adjust the decay a little bit. Of course, that will go hand in hand with your effects. You might want to put a little ambiance in if you're going to pull the decay back. And you can adjust all of them at once as well. Simply click on that to get it to go away. Finally, all the way up at the top here, these yellow keys will give you a lovely unison sound in the ensemble and solo articulations. So this is an incredibly useful collection of really unique instruments. Samba drums from Waves Factory.